weeks, Ethan had been living a nightmare. Every morning, he woke up to new red marks on his arms, neck, and torso. The itching was unbearable, a constant reminder that something was crawling over his skin during the night. At first, he thought it was a simple bedbug infestation. He washed his sheets in hot water, vacuumed every corner of his apartment, and sprayed over-the-counter insecticides. But the bites kept appearing, and the itching never stopped. Ethan was a practical man, a software engineer who thrived on logic and order. He wasn't prone to panic, but the mystery of the bites was unraveling him. He spent hours online, researching bedbugs, their habits, and how to eradicate them. Every search led back to the same conclusion: bedbugs. Except the evidence didn't add up. He inspected his mattress, checked the seams of his furniture, and set traps. Nothing. No tiny insects scurrying for cover, no blood spots, no shed skins. It was maddening. At work, he was distracted, constantly rubbing at his neck and arms. His coworkers noticed. "You okay, Ethan?" they'd ask, their voices tinged with concern. He'd shrug it off, but the truth was he wasn't okay. He was exhausted, his skin raw from scratching, and his mind racing with unanswered questions. One night, in a desperate attempt to catch the culprits in the act, Ethan set up his phone to record his bed while he slept. He positioned the camera carefully, ensuring it had a clear view of his pillow and the surrounding area. He went to bed feeling uneasy but determined. The next morning, he reviewed the footage. The first few hours were uneventful, just him tossing and turning. But around 3 a.m., he noticed something strange. His blanket shifted slightly, as if something moved underneath it. He paused the video, zoomed in, and squinted at the screen. There was no insect, no bedbug, just a vague ripple. Yet, the unsettling feeling lingered. Something was there, too small or too quick to see. That afternoon, Ethan called an exterminator. He needed a professional. When Carl, a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor, arrived, he listened patiently as Ethan described the problem. Carl nodded, jotting down notes on a clipboard, then donned gloves and began a thorough inspection. He shone a flashlight into every seam of the mattress, pulled the bed frame apart, checked behind the headboard, along the baseboards, inside the closet, and even inspected the rugs. After nearly an hour, Carl shook his head. "I'm not finding any evidence of bedbugs," he said, a puzzled frown creasing his forehead. "No droppings, no shells, no eggs. Are you sure the bites happen at night?" "Yes," Ethan replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "I wake up with fresh ones almost every morning. They itch like crazy. They look just like bedbug bites. What else could it be?" Carl sighed, scratching his jaw. "I don't know. Sometimes people mistake other insect bites for bedbugs. Could be fleas. Do you have pets?" "No," Ethan said. "I live alone. No pets, no recent travel. Just these bites that won't go away." Carl gave him a sympathetic look. "I could set some professional traps, see if we catch anything. If you're okay with it, I'll leave them overnight and come back tomorrow." Ethan agreed, clinging to the hope that Carl's traps would confirm the presence of bedbugs, and they could finally get rid of them. That night, he tried to sleep, knowing that traps were set and someone else was invested in solving this mystery. But the itching returned, as always. Little pinpricks that forced him to scratch until his skin felt raw. The next day, Carl returned and checked the traps. He shook his head, baffled. "Not a single catch. These traps are specifically designed to lure bedbugs. If they were here, we'd at least see one by now." He stared at Ethan, eyebrows raised. "I might recommend you see a dermatologist. Could be a skin condition that resembles insect bites." Ethan's shoulders sagged. The last thing he wanted was another dead end, but he made the appointment. The dermatologist, Dr. Bailey, examined the bites, took a biopsy of one inflamed area, and promised to get back to him with results. In the meantime, she prescribed a cream to ease the itching. For a brief moment, Ethan considered the possibility that this was all in his head or that his skin just flared up spontaneously. But the marks were so distinct, and the nighttime pattern was undeniable. He returned home feeling uneasy. He would try the cream, wait for the tests, and see if the bites persisted. They did. By the time Dr. Bailey called him back, he had new bites along his wrist and under his arm. Her voice was cautious over the phone. "Your biopsy shows an inflammatory reaction consistent with insect bites. There's no sign of a dermatological disease causing this. Something is biting you, Ethan." He felt a chill. Then why can't anyone find them? There was a pause. "I'd like to refer you to an entomologist, someone who specializes in identifying insects. I know it sounds unusual, but we might be dealing with something less common than bedbugs. I have a colleague who occasionally consults on medical mystery cases like this. If you're willing, I can set up an appointment." Ethan agreed, though the idea that his problem was so unusual it required a specialized expert made him uneasy. Within a week, he found himself meeting Dr. Ching, an entomologist known for consulting on rare cases. Dr. Ching greeted him with a steady, reassuring tone. "I understand you've been through quite an ordeal," he said, scanning the notes Dr. Bailey had sent over. "You're sure these occur only in your home, at night?" Ethan nodded. "I never get new bites when I stay overnight at my parents' house or even when I crash at a friend's place. It's only in my bedroom." Dr. Ching tilted his head, intrigued. "That suggests the source is localized. If it's not bedbugs, it could be something else entirely. Let's do a thorough examination of your sleeping environment." Back at Ethan's apartment, Dr. Ching moved slowly and methodically, using a headlamp and magnifier to inspect the mattress, bedding, and frame. He took small samples of dust and fibers from the mattress seams and carefully sealed them in vials. He even scraped a bit of the wooden bed frame into a sample bag. Throughout the process, he said very little, just nodding occasionally. Ethan watched him closely. He didn't notice when Dr. Ching's posture stiffened slightly, his breathing quickened. It happened when the entomologist lifted the corner of the mattress and examined the underside. Dr. Ching held the magnifier up close, frowning, then quickly took a sample. His face gave nothing away, but Ethan sensed something had been found. "Did you see something?" Ethan asked, his voice coming out more urgent than he intended. Dr. Ching pursed his lips. "I'm not entirely sure. I caught a glimpse of something unusual. I'll need to analyze the samples under a microscope. Let's not jump to conclusions yet." Ethan's heart sank. Another wait, another night of uncertainty, but he understood the need for thoroughness. Dr. Ching left with his samples, promising to call as soon as he had any answers. That night, Ethan abandoned his bedroom for the relative safety of the living room couch. He layered himself with freshly laundered blankets, clinging to the hope that distance from his bed might offer some relief. But when he woke up, his heart sank. New bites marred the skin along his ankle, angry red welts glaring back at him like taunts. His stomach churned as he rubbed at the irritated skin. The realization dawned on him. Whatever this was, it had spread. It wasn't confined to his bed, it felt unstoppable. As he wondered what to do next, his phone buzzed. Ethan snatched it up. It was Dr. Ching. His voice came through the line, sharp and urgent. "Ethan, I need you to come to my lab immediately." The urgency in his tone made Ethan's stomach churn. "Is it bad?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "I'll explain everything when you get here," Dr. Ching replied. Ethan's mind raced during the drive to the lab. His palms were clammy against the steering wheel, his thoughts looping through worst-case scenarios. By the time he stepped into the small, sterile lab, his nerves were raw. Dr. Ching greeted him with a brief nod, his expression unusually grim. He gestured toward the table where a small petri dish sat beneath a high-powered microscope. "These are the samples we collected from your mattress. See for yourself what we found," Dr. Ching said. Ethan leaned in, squinting through the eyepiece. At first, he saw what looked like dust motes and fabric fibers. Then he noticed tiny shapes, creatures smaller than the head of a pin. They had long, thin bodies and multiple sets of legs. They weren't round and reddish like bedbugs. They were slender and fast-looking, almost worm-like, with tiny appendages. "What are those?" Ethan asked, pulling away, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Ching leaned closer to the sealed container, his brow furrowed in concentration. He adjusted his glasses, his voice low and deliberate. "We've identified the species. It's called Triatoma infestans." Ethan's heart sank. "What is that?" "It's a parasite usually found in South America," Dr. Ching explained. "They're known for their aggressive feeding and ability to adapt to human environments. They feed on bodily fluids, and their bites look like bedbug marks." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "How dangerous are they?" Dr. Ching's voice was firm. "Very. They can cause severe skin infections, allergic reactions, and even secondary diseases. They're not just biting you, they're nesting, breeding in the crevices of your bed frame, possibly even your walls. Each night, they emerge to feed. They're almost invisible to the naked eye, and their bites mimic bedbug reactions, which is why everyone was fooled." Ethan felt a surge of nausea. He had unknowingly been a host to an invasive species right in his home. "But how did they get here?" he asked, struggling to stay calm. Dr. Ching shook his head. "Could be through imported furniture or a package that was shipped from abroad. Sometimes these organisms hitchhike in cargo, but we need to act fast. I'm going to call in a specialized team." Later that evening, Ethan stood in the corner of his living room as a small team of experts in protective gear entered his bedroom. He could see them through the half-open door. Dr. Ching supervised from the hallway, pointing out where he had taken samples. Another expert, a woman named Doctor Mason, approached the mattress with a flashlight and a special vacuum device. She paused suddenly and backed away, her eyes wide. "What's wrong?" Ethan called, anxiety drilling into him. Dr. Mason's voice shook. "They're moving, a lot of them. Oh my God, they're everywhere." Her voice rose, sharp and panicked. Ethan heard a scream from one of the technicians. He rushed to the doorway, only to be held back by Dr. Ching. He could see the flashlight beam shaking wildly, tiny shapes scurrying across the bed frame, some dropping to the floor and disappearing into cracks. He had never seen professionals panic like this. These were seasoned experts, and they were screaming at what they found. "What are we dealing with?" Ethan's voice was hoarse, fear tightening his throat. Dr. Ching tried to remain composed, but his face was pale. "They're in greater numbers than I expected. We're going to have to seal off this room and possibly the entire apartment. This isn't a simple extermination job. We need containment and immediate eradication methods. I've never faced something like this in a home environment." In the chaos, Dr. Mason managed to capture a few specimens in a sealed container. She was breathing heavily through her mask, her hands shaking. Ethan could see them, tiny, pale creatures writhing inside the container. Even looking at them made his skin itch. Within the hour, more experts arrived. They donned heavy protective suits, setting up a negative pressure environment to ensure nothing escaped. The building superintendent was called, then the local health department. Everyone who saw these creatures reacted with horror and disbelief. This was something entirely new, a horrifying discovery that defied the normal rules of pest infestations. Ethan was escorted out of his apartment and told to find temporary lodging. The health department insisted on treating not just his unit, but the surrounding areas. They had to ensure these invasive creatures hadn't spread. It would take days, maybe weeks, of intense measures to kill them off. Ethan watched the commotion from the hallway, feeling a strange mix of terror and relief. For once, there was no doubt that something real and menacing lurked in his home. But at least now, people believed him and were taking action. Over the coming days, Ethan communicated constantly with Dr. Ching, who updated him on the progress. The team managed to kill off most of the colony using a combination of methods, including intense heat treatments and a specialized solution imported from an advanced research lab. They had to remove the mattress, the bed frame, even parts of the wall paneling to ensure no eggs or larvae remained hidden. It was a thorough and unsettling process, but eventually they declared the infestation eradicated. When Ethan finally returned to his apartment, it felt like stepping into a new place. The bed was replaced, the walls repaired, every surface sterilized. He hesitated as he approached the bedroom door, a memory of the screams and panic flashing through his mind. The silence inside was thick, but Dr. Ching's reassurance echoed in his ears. It was safe now. A week later, Ethan met with Dr. Ching and Dr. Mason at the lab for a final debrief. They explained that the creatures had likely been introduced through a piece of imported furniture Ethan had purchased at a discount warehouse months ago. The larvae had adapted to human living conditions, breeding rapidly and feeding off him every night. They were a new variant of a known parasitic species, one that specialists around the world would now be alerted to. It might change protocols for how certain imports are inspected. Ethan was grateful to be rid of them, but the psychological toll lingered. Every itch made him jump, and every tiny speck of dust made his heart skip a beat. Dr. Mason offered a comforting smile. "You'll recover from this. It was unprecedented. You did everything right by seeking help." He nodded, thankful for their efforts. He couldn't blame the exterminator or the dermatologist for not seeing what this was. None of them had ever encountered anything like it. Experts had looked closer, screamed at the horrifying discovery. He couldn't imagine a stronger testament to how bizarre this situation had been. A few weeks after the ordeal, Ethan sat in his living room, flipping channels on the television. He felt calmer now, the trauma fading slightly with each passing day. He ran his fingertips along his arm. No fresh bites, no unexplained marks. He could finally sleep again, and that mattered more than anything. The story spread quietly through certain professional circles. Entomologists traded the images and data, discussing how to prevent similar outbreaks. Health officials refined their protocols. For Ethan, life slowly returned to normal. He replaced his furniture, carefully choosing local vendors and checking every item meticulously. He learned more about pests and parasites than he ever cared to, but it made him feel in control. In the end, the mystery that started with a guess led to a horrifying revelation that no one saw coming. It was a reminder that the world still holds strange and unsettling surprises, lurking where we least expect them. Ethan had survived it, and now he could only hope his story might help others understand that not every itch, not every bite, is caused by something familiar.